Welcome to What's Trending, your go-to podcast for staying informed about what's trending in the ever-evolving landscape of Westchester and beyond. We are your hosts, Amanda DePalma, Senior Vice President of Events and Development, and Dr. Marcia Gordon, President and CEO of the Business Council of Westchester. On today's episode, we're excited to welcome Maura, Carlin, and Christie, Derrico, co-hosts of the Balanced Dilemma podcast. Recently, in one of the summer issues of 914 Inc., Maura and Christie's podcast was featured in an article titled 5 must-listen podcasts for Westchester business professionals, along with the BCW's What's Trending. So from there, I had the idea of doing a podcast swap between the Balanced Dilemma and What's Trending. We are thrilled to have Maura and Christie here today to talk about the evolution of their podcast, the universal struggle of balance, career pivots, and the stories behind the women that they spotlight. Be sure to tune in future months for my appearance on the Balanced Dilemma coming soon. What's Trending is sponsored by Thompson & Bender. Thank you for your support of the BCW Podcast Network. Looking for unparalleled success in PR and marketing? Look no further than Thompson & Bender, the leader in strategic communications. With over 30 years of expertise, they've mastered everything from PR and advertising to social media and event marketing, ensuring their clients' success. Recognized with awards like the Business Council of Westchester Hall of Fame, City and State Power 100, and voted Best in Westchester for advertising, public relations, and social media by 914 Inc., their track record speaks for itself. Join the ranks of clients from Fortune 500 corporations, small businesses, educational and healthcare institutions, and many more who've benefited from their innovative strategies. Trust Thompson & Bender to elevate your brand to new heights. Maura, Christie, welcome to What's Trending.
Thank you so much for having us.
Let's start at the beginning. Can you share the origin? Everyone loves a good origin story of the Balanced Dilemma. What inspired you both to create a show focused on women, work, reinvention, and navigating life's pivots?
Well, it's a really good story, but I'm going to let Christie tell it.
Well, we both knew about each other kind of tangentially. Maura did a local television show, and I was a guest. And I walked in a bit frazzled, as I usually am, but very adroit at making things look like they were going well, even if they weren't. And Maura turned to me and said, "You can't believe what I left at home." The real quote is in the article I've posted on Substack and may not be suitable for all audiences. So
everyone's now going to go and find it.
Yeah. But I said, "Oh, I love this woman." She admitted to me that her life might be as frazzled as mine, and yet she's pulling it off because she has this great show. And that's how we met. And we started talking about the struggles, exchanging articles. Reading and being educated and informed is a big part of our relationship. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, absolutely. Constantly exchanging the information. I'm a meme sharer, so
am I. I love a good meme.
And this is over a decade ago.
Wow,
yes.
That's incredible.
And we did start it on television. Put it aside for a little bit as we continued our work and research. And then we started really as a radio show in the height of the pandemic.
So I have to say this started out as the answer to an origin story question, but now I want to know, it sounds like there's also been an evolution story in here. So from live on air to a home studio to brick and mortar space and then to Riverside, can you walk us through all these different pivots and share some of the memorable pitfalls you've encountered along the way?
Well, we need to give a plug for a cute little restaurant right down the street from where we're recording, which is the Kneaded Bread.
Oh, yes.
We met there in the pandemic to have a session to say, how are we going to make this into a show? And we were talking about doing a podcast or going on the radio. And people were leaning in, women, saying, "Oh, I love what you're talking about, and let me tell you what happened with me." And we knew we had something.
I mean, it turned into a discussion group in the middle of the Kneaded Bread.
Everyone was chiming in.
Yes.
As I was trying to hide the brownie that I was eating, which is one of my favorite things to get there. In any event, we had the great idea of going on air.
And so we reached out to WVOX.
Ah, yes.
And they were actually so welcoming and so thrilled to have us, probably in part because we did not discuss politics, which was largely what they had.
And at the time, I think the Business Council as well, we had a show on WVOX as well.
And they provided a wonderful home for us to get started, including learning how to put out our radio show as a podcast. because this was all new for us as well.
And to turn it around, too, to really meet your listeners where they're at. And so it sounds like the podcast was just sort of that next step in continuing reaching the audience.
We took the recordings and turned them into podcasts. Now, we also took on-air phone calls, which was terrifying to do that.
That sounds so scary.
Yes.
Oh, and I love it.
Maura loved it, and I said, I don't know who's going to call. I have no idea what they're going to ask. But we started with that, and we really learned how to do everything. And we do divide duties, and we naturally prefer certain things, and we also do things we don't like, but we figured it out.
Don't we all?
So the shout out to all listeners is you can do it, because I have learned things, Maura has learned things that we never thought we would do. And sometimes we'll sit down with our children and say, look at what we did, and what do you think? How could I do this better? And of course, they're light years beyond what we're doing. And we learn and we adapt.
But I have to say, I find the beauty of podcasts is that there isn't just one right way to do it. You find what works for you, you find what works for your listeners, and you adapt.
And it doesn't necessarily stay the same.
Oh, no, every day is a little different.
On the radio, we had a lot of guests in person, and then we had to learn how to have remote guests, which is a much different thing, especially because we didn't control the audio. And there were issues. I mean, there were times, as you probably experienced also, where there was mowing going on right outside the studio, and there were phone connection problems. But in any event, we worked there until the radio station closed in September 2023.
Yeah, without notice closing. Yeah. And so
It was an emergency pivot.
Yes, absolutely.
To Christie's office.
Yes, also lawnmower issues and doorbells and things like that. But we researched how to do a podcast from your garage, and we did it. And that was another thing. We got the microphones that were recommended. And unfortunately, we couldn't figure out how to both be in the same room, which you have mastered here in this studio. So Maura would sit in my freezing cold, what do you call it? The alleyway, hallway.
Alcove.
And that was the only way we could make the audio work, with the two of us being near each other, but not in the same room.
Because one of the things we found on the radio, and I actually loved, was that we were in the same room and we could go like this and tag each other, and we play off of each other.
Well, it makes a difference when you're talking to somebody, interview style and having a conversation.
And we made a decision early on that we would run it as a conversation. So we don't do heavy editing in terms of looking for those little sound bites. I mean, we do that for when we put out reels and things like that. But it was a decision that was going to be the style.
Well, it kind of the way that I always look at the podcast and what we do with What's Trending and the podcast network is, to me, it's like you're inviting somebody into your home if you're sitting in your living room and having a cup of coffee and you're just talking to them and you're just sharing that conversation with the world. And I think that's really important.
So then we had another pivot, which we had been waiting for, which is our connection to the LMC Media network. They were building a podcast studio, and we were waiting for them to get it open so we could use it. It did open. I want to say it was like March of 24 or something like that. And so we pivoted to going there and doing it, where we had other people taking care of our audio and video, which was that was a big switch that we did. I think that was then, actually. We didn't really post video before that.
Correct. We did YouTube for the first time, but we had to deal with a lot of technical issues at times. Through no one's fault, you would get in and, oops, the power's out on the whole street. And little things
what do you do then?
Exactly. And here you've booked this guest, people are busy, and we've adapted. So what's nice about what you have here, when you can have another platform, so if there's a snowstorm, we can say in a snap, hey, we're still on, we're just going to pivot to Zoom. And all of these things we've adapted to. The quality of the content has been different. There's so many things that we've learned along the way.
And it made it easy. It actually, in some ways, made it easier to have remote guests. But we've had yet another pivot, which is
we're just pivoting on top of our pivots.
The show's about pivots.
Yes, I was just about to say that.
And you got to be light on your feet. I think that's what we've learned. I kind of follow the idea that you're not a tree. You can move.
Absolutely.
So now we use the studio, but we also have started doing it remotely, not being in the same room with guests on another platform.
And then the next pivot, which is what I want to do, is I want to go on a podcast tour. So
I'll
let you know when the BCW Podcast Network goes on tour.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. I mean,
ready.
it is kind of interesting when you see all these people who have podcasts actually doing tours and shows, and people are buying tickets
Selling
to sit
out.
there. It is kind of amazing.
I know.
Well, I like that idea.
Right?
I don't know, something else.
You know, we
for us
also
to
one of the
consider.
other things that we also do, which is related to that, is we do events for listeners and for some of our guests. So we've had authors come speak about different topics, and people who follow us show up. We've had shopping and speaking events. We've had, and this is one of my favorites, there's an artist, Melinda Bowie, who's been on our show, a local artist, and we've done 2 art events in what was then her studio.
Oh, that's incredible.
And she talks about her art, and you could see how it evolved. So we do a number of events.
But having live events, it's live. So
yes.
if you have a weather event, if there's a COVID outbreak, we have rolled through everything, and you have to just have thick skin and just accept it. And we've done events at the Emlyn Theater, which has a lot of seats. We've done wine bars. We've done women's backyards, which people really love that. It's very intimate. Mm-hmm. But one was a big election debate, and half of our attendees decided they really wanted to see the debate, and we had lower turnout than we expected. And you just can't predict these things. And you just have to smile and move on.
Absolutely. No. And you know, the Business Council, we host probably 50 to 75 events a year. So we are very familiar with that. You had mentioned, you know, really listening to your fans, listening to your listeners. What kind of responses or comments from fans have resonated the most with you or affirmed the impact of all these pivots and everything that you've created and you're continuing to create?
Well, we can see how many listens we get and reposts and things like that with the algorithms on these platforms. Some are easier to use than others. But the most rewarding thing is when you meet with a group of women or something and they say to you, hey, I really loved that guest and I got something out of it. And the story.
Or I didn't agree with it.
Well, that can be.
No, it's interesting because you've got somebody talking.
Yes.
That's right. And the stories that we've had, you know, one woman who has a new business in Martha's Vineyard, MV Salads. Super cool. She moved to a place she wasn't from, started a business, now has multiple locations, is trademarking, branding her product, going on tour with it. These are the stories that we love to tell. But we like to say we're Main Street and Wall Street. It's not always a story that made it to the Wall Street Journal. It might be a story that somebody did something hyper local and they're really proud of. And that's what's great about our stories. And people report back that they get stuff out of it.
Because we firmly believe that every woman has a story. Frankly, everyone has a story. And it's not just the famous and prominent people that we should be listening to. I mean, we learn a lot from guests who are just like us, living different lives. And I've found people commenting on it. If you don't mind, I'll give a couple of examples. Our recent episode, which was with a woman named Catherine O'Toole, who Christie met, and she made some probably offhand comment. And when Christie told me about it, I was like, well, that we need to talk about. Because she said she insisted that when she gave up her publishing career to stay home with the kids, she insisted that her husband pay her an amount that had to hurt.
Okay.
What an interesting concept. I've had women come up to me and said, I saw that. What an idea. I never thought of it. And others go, why would you do that if you're in a trusting marriage? So it was fascinating.
The different sides of
different sides of it. So that was great.
Yes.
To have that
so
kind
beware. If you're talking to me, I'm listening and I'm flagging everything and I'm going back to Maura and saying, this is what I think we should speak. But with that woman, with Catherine, her husband is quite famous in making
Typography.
Like,
typesetting.
Interesting, yes.
Yes. So he had a big career and she had a very big career and gave it up because she fell in love with her children, which is another theme with our guests that it's okay to talk about. There have been several women that said, I was on this track doing great and I had to pivot because I love my children or something happened that I had to be at home with my kids. And so that's something we want to say, okay, this happened. How can we have the next act? It might not happen when you wanted it to happen, but how can you be prepared? How can you build your brand, build your new story, and have the confidence to do that?
Well, and I think you both have sort of said it, just how important it is to spotlight these different types of stories. So thank you so much for this so far. We're going to take a quick break. You are listening to the BCW Podcast Network. This is What's Trending. Looking for unparalleled success in PR and marketing? Look no further than Thompson & Bender, the leader in strategic communications. With over 30 years of expertise, they've mastered everything from PR and advertising to social media and event marketing, ensuring their clients' success. Recognized with awards like the Business Council of Westchester Hall of Fame, City and State Power 100, and voted Best in Westchester for advertising, public relations, and social media by 914 Inc., their track record speaks for itself. Join the ranks of clients from Fortune 500 corporations, small businesses, educational and healthcare institutions, and many more who've benefited from their innovative strategies. Trust Thompson & Bender to elevate your brand to new heights. Welcome back to the BCW Podcast Network. This is What's Trending. Before the break, we were talking to Maura and Christie about their journeys, the evolution of the balance dilemma, and the stories that they're telling. You had mentioned before, all the pivots that you had with the podcast itself, but I know that you've had also significant personal and professional pivots. Can you tell us a little bit about that, where you both were coming from and where you're both headed now?
Well, again, that is part of our origin story because we were both lawyers, litigators. She calls herself a trial lawyer. I called myself a litigator, and we had different paths in that.
Very different than this.
I was a big law litigator in the city, unpredictable, long hours, with a spouse who had not a litigator, but even more unpredictable hours, whereas Christie made a choice to be local and built her career and practice that way. And that's sort of where we started when we met was, well, why is one working or not working, or can you melt them?
And how do you melt them?
And can you?
Yes.
So I ultimately left the practice of law and turned to journalism that I could do locally.
Flexible. Accessible. I've always thought I'd like to make a book, tell the story of my how I got here. And that was a grandmother who did just what we're talking about and a mother who did that. So each one of us built on the last, So my mother was one of the guests that we had on our show because I felt it was really important that she tell her story, which had a lot of pivots and turns. And it's something I wanted to share with other women because women can sometimes feel it's not possible, but it is possible to make changes because what Maura was dealing with professionally, that's not sustainable when you're trying to raise a family. And it's not enjoyable also. So going after what you like and making it work for you and your family, that's what is the story that I'd like to pursue and tell.
And speaking of your mother, it was really inspirational to see somebody who had really done all these pivots. But I like hearing the later in life pivots because another great episode was Gloria Felt, who for around the turn of the century, which sounds funny, we're talking the 2000s, she was head of Planned Parenthood. But her career in that area didn't start until she was 55.
Love Gloria.
Here we are decades later, and she's still going about trying to get women into leadership, pushing what she really believes in. But the fact that you're not done yet.
Right.
And I just find that so inspirational, as it was with your mother, who went back to school and went to a new career in entrepreneurship, which is just, fascinating and really, for me, inspirational.
She's a tech pioneer, but she cannot figure out the remote control, so I don't really know how that works. What's another favorite episode that you liked?
Well, I actually liked, and these are local women, the Skura Style episode, which is fairly recent. I think it was 91 or something in the low 90s. Two women, Linda Sawyer and Allison Matz, who were friends as little kids and rivals in a spelling bee and ended up living as adults in the same community. Big careers, one in advertising, one in other media, came together and created a product. Now, you might not think it's a sexy product. It's sponges, Skura style sponges, which happen to be great, by the way. I just turned my kids onto them. And Eva Mendes has gotten involved with their sponges and is an investor. But their story, you learn they go through a lot to create a product. I mean, we forget when we see a product how many prototypes there were, all the things they had to consider.
And it's really cool how it fades when it gets older.
Right.
That's a very unique thing. But stories, these are the stories that we've doubled down on. And so when we talk about future things we'd like to do, we want to put these stories in a book. And we are kicking around what this will look like, what the stories will look like. And it's definitely contingent upon what people want to hear and what they want to take away from the project. So that's something we'd like to get to.
But I think it's really important that the people we talk to, as I think I said earlier, aren't all famous and prominent.
Because you're really spotlighting.
A lot of them, we're spotlighting real people. And I think that's really important for us to see, because Michelle Obama, while her life may be inspiring, that's not the life most of us are going to lead.
But since we're talking about the Business Council of Westchester, we did get 2 products out there that we were promoting, former guests, Marie Charlotte Pirot, who owns an olive oil company, and then Oot Laundrigan that has Heimat, which is a liqueur. And her story was so cool because she worked in the brewing industry as the only woman
in Germany.
In Germany, so she would explain. I guess they go and test the product at times, and she would be the only woman in a sea of men. And when they came to the United States, her husband had a job opportunity. She became a stay-at-home mother, right? And she thought that was it. So someone comments upon her liqueur that she makes during the holidays, and she gets an idea that she's going to bottle this and produce it. Check her out, because I was just in this great restaurant and I looked up and there it is, the liqueur. And this is something that she made in her kitchen, was her grandmother's recipe or great-grandmother. But those are the interesting stories that you think you're on one path and then you're on another. And I believe she's being supported and helped by her family, so it's pivoting into a whole other family endeavor.
Well, that is one of the things we say here at the Business Council, is just how important, relationships are, and the stories these individuals, the businesses themselves, how businesses have met through the Business Council, and then the stories that they have. So all of this, it's incredible. What's next for The Balanced Dilemma? Any upcoming episodes, themes, projects that listeners, which now What's Trending listeners are going to become Balanced Dilemma listeners as well. I know
We sure hope so. That's wonderful.
Well, learning new things, part of our endeavor to put our messages in print, we started a Substack this summer, which this is, my lane. I've been the one to deal with the newsletter, which gives me angst, and I do make errors quite often. In case you see things today,
we've learned to let go of perfection.
Yes,
we will not judge.
So if you read the one I posted this morning, it said insert link for YouTube on the actual post.
You should add that to the stories in the book.
Exactly. So I'm like so mad at myself, but you know what? I'm human. There we go. In any event, we started this new platform. It's a platform that a lot of writers get to put material and have a message out. So it's an experiment for us, but we're hoping that could take us towards the ultimate end of having a written format and telling these great stories that we're almost at episode 100. We're nearing it.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so some future guests.
In fact, 96 just went up. That's what she was posting about, which is actually something that stresses parents. We've done things on how the college application process stresses parents. But you think you're done. You get them into college, they go to college, they graduate. Well, guess what? You got another big stress coming.
My little guy is 5, and everyone keeps telling me it's just never done. So.
It's never done. So we interviewed Nadine Barker-Bellata, who has a company, Complete Candidate, that helps recent grads find jobs. Not just finding jobs, but figuring out how to find a job, because
that's important.
And it's not the same landscape that we went through.
Very different.
But I think the message can really, it's universal, because learning how to master LinkedIn, what does your resume look like?
What do you look like as a candidate?
That's right. And she had a lot of great takeaways, I thought, for college grads and beyond. And so that's one episode. And then we have another one coming up with a local business owner.
A local boutique. And I don't want to call it tailor, but she's a dressmaker.
Beautiful.
She makes her own, the clothing that she sells in her store, as well as doing other tailoring. And she's quite talented, and she showed in Paris recently, so that's coming up. We will be interviewing these 2 fascinating women who have been writing partners for 38 years. Now, working with someone and writing together, it takes a talent to be able to write together. And we've interviewed some people who paired up. And it's interesting because they have a book called Not Done Yet, which in many ways very much resonates. And we're talking to someone about finance, why women need to know about money now.
Absolutely.
And that's like sort of a big thing on our list.
Shocking that we'd even need to say that we have to talk about it.
But these are all the stories that are not only the personal stories of people, but the stories that people can take something away from and learn from them. So, Maura and Christie, thank you so much for joining us today on What's Trending. Your insights into storytelling, balance, reinvention, and the women you champion are truly inspiring. Thank you again to our sponsors, M&T Bank and Thompson & Bender, and our listeners of the What's Trending podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the BCW Podcast Network. Be sure to check out the BCW Podcast Network's expansive lineup of shows: Leadership Unleashed, What's Trending, Advocacy and Politics Unplugged, The Member Spotlight, and Nonprofit Voices of Impact. The Business Council of Westchester is the county's largest business membership organization focusing on economic development and advocacy. With over 1,100 members, it is our mission to work for the profitability of our members and the prosperity of the Westchester community. To learn more, go to thebcw.org.